I'll send it to you then.
Perfect. Yeah, greetings from Grand Rapids.
How's the weather?
It's getting colder, yeah, and the leaves are falling. It was late autumn this year. Like usually the leaves are turning at the beginning of October, a couple weeks in, but the leaves are just now like changing up. So
Really? Wow.
yeah,
That is late.
I know, and we're approaching Thanksgiving. So yeah, it was a weird year. But
so where in town do you live?
I am in the south side of Grand Rapids. So
Oh, okay. Yeah.
like I don't know, you probably
I'm
don't
very
remember.
familiar with Grand Rapids. I lived there for 10 plus years, so.
Cool. I'm going to turn you up a little bit.
Okay.
Sweet. Yeah, so it was like Holland, Kalamazoo.
Oh yeah. I lived there. I lived on Kalamazoo right by Franklin, and I lived in that neighborhood a long time. That's where my grandparents actually grew up, in that neighborhood.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That is so nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I grew up in Hudsonville, and that's pretty close to Holland.
Yep.
So it's that Dutch connection there that I have with you a little bit. Although my mom's like super Danish. So that's where, like flipping apple skeever pancake balls, the whole 9 yards with that. So
yeah. The Danes amongst the Dutch.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of jokes I heard about that in the past too. So
yeah.
So
tell me a little more about yourself. You're a student at Cornerstone, or you were a student at Cornerstone?
Yeah, I graduated from Cornerstone University, I think in 2016. It took me like 8 years to end up actually fulfilling my degree requirements after transferring from Moody Bible Institute. It seemed like my biblical studies degree was sort of obsolete anywhere that I went, but that's all right. I didn't really think I was going to do much with it anyways. After the first couple of years there. And then I tried to get into a bunch of state schools, and then ended up transferring to Cornerstone, and they took me in open arms, and I started studying biology like immediately. Imagine that, like biology at Cornerstone. It's really bizarre. And then I met the literature professor and soon transitioned into the humanities program, which thank God I did. And somehow scratched through and got a degree there, and then said I'd never go back to school again. But it's like I'm reading all the time. Like now I'm revisiting like my thesis and like all this stuff, and it's all been related to Jordan Peterson and in a big way. So yeah. I moved out to Washington for a while, and then I ended up coming back, and I ended up meeting my wife, and we got married like right after I graduated from college, and yeah, we've been making a home here. So
okay. What are you working, or you got a job?
Painter. So that's a whole nother thing.
I see it on your. I painted for a summer in college, and so I know the look.
yeah. I think I have paint on my face. I was painting ceilings today, so yeah. But yeah, doing that, and that frees up so much time. Like I've heard so many people say to just listen to endless podcasts, books, you name it. It's just I've got 8 hours that I've got to fill time with, and I know that some people are envious of that, but I feel like a monk, where like they say like what would it be, the Benedictine monks that specifically talked about freeing, like working laboriously with your hands and freeing your mind to contemplate God. Like their tracks. So
yeah. No, that's true. And I didn't know this until I started doing this YouTube channel, but there's a lot of people out there that they just by nature of their job, they're happier if their mind can go someplace while their hands do something else. And some people can do that and other people can't. And it depends a lot on the job, but yeah, painting, I totally get that.
Yeah. And it's a bizarre thing too, because I never would have imagined I would be working in a trade. You know, because your parents fill you with all sorts of aspirations and tell you how wonderful you are and how they see so many gifts in you. And you know, that whole speech, and then it's like, you know, I don't think I'm a disappointment to my parents at all in the least. They, you know, but it's one of those things where they see that potential in you to maybe do great things that nobody else can see besides your parents. And, you know, it's like, I gotta pay bills. Like, it's very pragmatic for me. And it's like, where's my heart lie too? Is it in the work, or is it in the, or is it in something else, like family? Like I can do anything as long as if my heart is like correctly ordered, you know, like correctly ordering your loves and being like, well, family comes first. And it's like, all right, well then I'll do whatever I need to in order to have that family, you know? So, and we don't have kids, but we're hoping to, so.
Okay.
Which is scary.
Well, you know, I often think that the church traded out a more biblical vision. I mean, at the beginning of the Bible, God makes Adam with his hands, and God is seen very much as a tradesman, and Adam and Eve are gardeners. And then the Greeks come along and it's like, oh no, we should work with our minds. It's like, well, here's the thing. You can do two things if you're working with your hand. You can work with your mind and your hands. But it's a fairly Greek culture in that sense, because we value people who work with their minds. I have a friend who, actually a member of this church, who works in a trade school for electricians, and he says, you know, these are great paying jobs, and we never have enough people who will, you know, who are interested in the trade. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I think that everybody's hurting for good help, and it's weird to see the resurgence sort of happening in the trades too. And I don't know how far that'll go, but there's a lot of people that need it right now, because everybody. I mean, I graduated with, you know, a solid GPA and was off to like looking at MFA programs and stuff like that. And I was like, what am I doing? I'm already like, I was on the low end of the debt scale. Like I only had 20,000 in debt, and most of the students alongside of me had like $60,000 to $80,000 in debt. And it's like, okay, well, they can't find any jobs. And that was the crazy part, is it was like learning all this stuff for jobs that weren't going to exist by the time we graduated. And it was bizarre, but
my great grandfather was a house painter in Grand Rapids, about exactly where you are. And he painted houses, but then he also painted, you know, he would do landscapes. And so he was an artist, and he would paint those. So it's a crazy thing.
That's so cool. I'm channeling him. Anyways, I've got so many things in my head that I want to talk to you about that are actually serious, and then I don't know how to bring them all together though, because it's like that's my big issue, I think, is trying to bring all these things together. And Jordan Peterson's been helping like a lot with sorting through some of this stuff that I've just left as loose ends, and so many things are loose ends in my head, and I'm trying to tie them together, and it's okay to not. I've sort of settled with being okay with not tying some of these things together, and that's the great mystery. But so
we'll start anywhere on your list, and we'll see where we go.
So I was, for my undergrad, I had to write a thesis, which ended up being like the longest paper I ever wrote. It was like 60 pages or something nuts like that, and had to be. My minor was philosophy, so it had to integrate sort of like creative writing and philosophy. That's what I studied, was creative writing, but the philosophy minor. And then, so I ended up looking at poetics, and that was where my mind just went naturally, because I've always been obsessed with the nature of the poem and what the poem is communicating, and the ways in which we try to grasp experience and put them into words. The these like tacit sort of thoughts, or maybe that's the wrong word, but whatever's looming in our heads that we can't quite articulate. So it was like, and I saw that poetry was like one of the only forms of writing that, and maybe even if it was uncommunicable to somebody else, I could say whatever I was feeling, or I could, I somehow connected to, um, maybe connecting is the wrong word, but I connected to some sort of articulation, even though it was through metaphor or some of these other rhetorical devices that we would use in the classic forms that one would follow in poetry. And that was a interesting spot to land, because it brought me straight into like Plato's work, Aristotle's work, and then up through like all the into Aquinas, and then found this intense like amount of information in Aquinas that I still am trying to get through, regarding like the metaphysics of human cognition. And so I think the thing that I want to talk about is intuition. And I feel like that's one of these things that I think that Jordan Peterson has alluded to in different areas. And I think it's something that maybe is part of his conception of the world, because, or even the conception of human cognition, because I think he's touching on these experiences that individuals can have that sort of grasp the universals, like the good, the beautiful, and the true, and embody them in the concrete material form. So it's like there's this concept in poetry called the concrete universal, and it is the actual idea that somewhere within the human intellect there's because Aquinas places the intellect within, or places intuition within the intellect, and that's sort of obvious even at an etymological level of those two words. But so the intuition is actually rooted in the intellect, according to Aquinas, even though many would argue against that, but he sort of created that. And then on top of that, there's an experience that somehow we can capture or apprehend a universal, and not even a top down or bottom up, but it's a either the universal is always there and it's captured in the essence of an actual material particular, or it is or it's an apprehension of some universal way out there, and somehow we've grasped hold of it. So I guess my thought is on that is I don't know how plausible these things are, and how if they're even things to concern myself with. But I think fundamentally there's something to this poetry thing that I am attracted to, simply because of this connection that I have felt all my life with God, this supernatural deity, this thing that I can't shake, and I feel like there's just these glimpses, and they're so elusive, and I'm so attracted to that, because we're naturally attracted to elusivity, And it's like this thing in art that, I don't know, brings us into contact with the good, the beautiful, and the true. And I don't know if you want to call that God, but I think God's the good, the beautiful, and the true. That's for sure. But it sounds way too like Platonic in my head, and I think the Western philosophical tradition, extending back to antiquity, is just, it's wrapped up in my head with my Christian ideology, and it's like hard to separate these two things. But
Well,
yeah,
it's so I'm going to share screen, which I can do um, on Zoom, and this is a course that's on YouTube,
okay,
and I've only gotten through about 3 of them, but all the kinds of things you're talking about are at least in the first 3. And he runs through, I mean, the title is a little distracting. He hasn't gotten into Buddhism, at least in the first 3 that I've listened to, but all of these kinds of issues of trying to figure out, okay, how do we know that what is dog? And so here we see a dog and we know that it's a dog, but what is dog? And so this is another professor at University of Toronto, and the sound in the class isn't great, and it's not, anybody
yeah,
who's listening to YouTube stuff always complains about the sound, unless somebody's taken some care to get the sound right. But it deals with a bunch of those same issues that you're talking about. So you might want to, let's see if I can figure out, you might want to check that out. So yeah, those, isn't it? I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about words and orienting, and we just have no idea how any of this works. We really don't.
No, I know, man. That's the hard part. Is it's like, that's what I don't get, is the certainty of so many people,
Yeah.
and it's like, that's even talking to, I mean, it's a militant atheist or my mother. It's like, who's a devout, Christian woman, and I love her to death. But then I start picking at her, and talking about how maybe it's not good to be a certain, maybe doubt can be a tool. I think Rilke, who is it? Rilke. He's a poet, and he talks about, in Letters to a Young Poet, it's probably like the most um, famous little letter writing exchange that this notable poet has with like this underdog poet, and he talks about how doubt can be such a useful, I don't want to use the word tool, because I don't think that's what he uses, but doubt can be so good. And man, I read that before I got into a lot of my pragmatist readings, which I was able to take a course on pragmatism at Cornerstone, which was taught by a professor named Michael Van Dyke. Do you know who that is? Probably not.
Dyke, he's a Dutchman. He's got to be
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's why I figured you knew him.
all those people with Dutch last names, they all know each other.
Yeah.
How many of them can there be?
Yeah.
But it's so, and even doubt. So Rene Descartes launches the West into the land of doubt, in a sense, with that methodology. Yet at the same time, like you say, it's a great tool, but when you paint, you don't, you buy these cans from, these cans from the supplier, and you don't doubt what's in them, and you don't doubt that it can sit on the wall, and you don't doubt that. I mean, it's a phenomenal world that we live in. I was in church on Sunday, and sometimes in church, or sometimes if I'm at a church meeting lately, I've been having this thought when I've been listening to examinations of new pastors, and I just think, how does this whole thing work with language? Why is it why is it that, well, how does language work with this? So then this morning I was watching Jordan Peterson at the Cambridge Union, because that video was up, and he's kind of out there being his old wild self again, in a sense, out on the trail, and so he's talking to these whole group of college age kids, and it's like, okay, what's going on in this room? But we all do it. We have a sense when we're doing it that it's important and that it's helpful, and the church is so neck deep in this stuff. And in my tradition, a confessionalist tradition, okay, here's this body of text that you subscribe to. Okay, but if you actually work in a church, you begin to realize that, well, people subscribe to things that they don't really understand. And even if I was working on a video that maybe I'll get time to do it today, but even with a phrase like Son of God, and Peterson mentioned that actually in a video, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by God's Son? Because in Christianity, we don't believe that, God hooked up with Mrs. God and, had Jesus. Well, then now, I listened to Jonathan Peugeot and Rachel Fulton Brown talk about Mary, and it's like, oh no, here we go. And so, well, Mary isn't God the mother, and then Jonathan, of course, that they go off and talk about those things. But it's like, okay, what's the relationship with language with all of this stuff? How does this help us? And then Peterson mentions in the Cambridge Union, well, and dead on right when he's talking about it as a psychologist, because this is what I've learned as a pastor. Most of what I do with people is I just listen to them. And so often after hours of listening, someone would be like, oh, pastor, you really helped me. And it's like, I just listened. And you talked yourself in and out of a lot of your problems. And Peterson notes correctly that when we talk, we're thinking. And so then you get into poetry. I don't know if you've watched Node in the Network, which is a guy, he's been reading a lot of Northrop Frye and William Blake. And so some of his early videos in that, he goes into this question of language. And so I forget the guy's name, but these ideas of so poetry. I mean, poetry is just eminently weird because you use language in a way that's so, by definition, non-prosaic, and it works for us. You break all the rules of grammar and sentence structure, and you lay it out here, and you're kind of feeling it. You don't know what you're doing, and you're posting those words up there, and someone else reads it and says, yeah. What's with that?
I don't know, inner subjectivity or something. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like experiencing someone else's.
If we post this video, there's a guy who will watch this video, because he and I have had some exchanges offline, but he's a huge poetry fan. He's writing poetry and he sends me some of it, and I can't keep up with all the poetry he writes. But poetry too is okay. So just the amazing thing that one person can use language in this way, and others, they get it, but they get more than what the original person put into it.
I can't even go there in my head. I mean, I get it though. I get, it's like, I've read this, but what we're talking about, people, not that I care, but people will laugh at it. It's like, it's one of those things where, like, that's absurd to even say. But I that's what's drawn me to it so much. And I think it's what's drawn me to Jesus too, because, and it's drawn any art form, especially, like, have you heard of Calvin Seerveld?
Oh yeah, he's CRC. He's a big guy in the CRC. Yeah.
So he has that book, Bearing Fresh Olive Leaves, where he talks about what's missing in Christian art is elusivity. And I mentioned that earlier, but I think that was like an important piece that I read that sort of made me realize that this Christian music stuff in this very straightforward cookie cutter black and white, and it's this, the rigidity of it is, it constricts people so much, and they find it so unattractive. And then you get into stuff that's a bit more mysterious, like there's even Jesus's responses to like some things in the Bible are like just absolutely ridiculous, and they're like, I mean, or like, you can't, not ridiculous, they're profound, you know,
Yeah.
but you can't fully grasp them. They're like vague notions. They're like close, but they're not there. They're grasping at something that we can't even understand fully, but we're trying, and there, it's just attractive. Like, I don't know how you can read Jesus's words in the way that he interacts with human beings. I mean, he was a human, but I mean, it, it's just it reveals, I feel like, who he is, you know. And it's like that that gets me, and I don't know what to do with it, you know. But because every single thing, it's like reading it over and over again, and it's like, what does that mean? What does it mean? And it's like trying to wrap your head around it, and it's like, maybe I'm not supposed to wrap my head around it. Maybe I'm just like supposed to kind of go towards it or something, or try to understand it and get close enough. And I think, and maybe it'll be revealed in time or in the end. And the end.
Well, this is why, to me, Christianity as a religion in which we don't finally save ourselves really works for me, because okay, Aquinas, oh, giant intellect, brilliant man. Okay. Aquinas doesn't save me. I can't even understand some of what he writes. And so some of the stuff that Peterson, so part of Peterson's question about Christianity is, okay, so Jesus, let's say Jesus rises from the dead. And so every year, because I'm a preacher, I have to go through some of these texts. And, a couple of years ago, I got enough familiarity and distance at the same time from the text to sit down and say, now, if I was Jesus' publicist, after he rose from the dead, what would I tell him to do? And what he does is completely different. I'd say, okay, you just march up there into the Antonia Palace, and you find Herod and you find Pilate, and you say, how do you like me now? Jesus doesn't do any of this. And you say,
Wow.
Yeah, and you say, okay, so what game are you playing? And so part of Peterson's commentary about the resurrection is exactly that. So Jesus does this, but then, and I hear a lot of other people say these kind of things too. Okay, but then, like, the world as we know it doesn't end. But part of the problem in that sentence is, well, when you say the world as we know it, you're presuming us here in 2018, the view we have of the world, and we know enough that the people around Jesus' time did not see the world like we see the world. So that right there, you have the question of, I mean, there's just so many questions with this stuff. And you're right. It's Christians. On one hand, Christians sometimes lock this down, and let's say they write the Left Behind series, and here this is all that's going to happen. And you just have to say, if you read church history, you read lots of that stuff, that people have been trying that forever. And the truth is nobody knows. Okay. That's the truth. Okay. Well, what do I do with that? You say, well, okay, nobody should be sure about anything. Nope, that's not right too, because you got to be sure about something, because when you walk into a room, you need to know what's in the can, and you need to know that paint will adhere to the brush or the roller, and you need to know how to do it. So, and so it's okay. I don't have a problem with as fundamentalist people as you can find saying, this is my certainty. I say, okay, God bless you. You have your certainty. I appreciate that. But there's a lot of weirdness to this world. And to me, it all boils down to, I got to trust Jesus more than I trust myself, because I don't know what the heck is going on. And that's what I see.
You know what's really bizarre in this whole thing? I remember writing an essay called The Christian Pragmatist, and I had to sort of reconcile pragmatism to Christianity in that class. And I was thinking about death a lot, and like the end for all of us is death, and nobody's seen the other side really, but that's like it's, I don't know if you can really get there philosophically as simply as I'm making it, but it's like, that's the end of knowledge, like conscious knowledge. And so that's like the end for all of us, and the only people that know are the people that have gotten there already. And it's not, that's not like I mean, you could take that to, if the pursuit of knowledge is like, the whole idea of learning how to die or whatever. But that if that's the end of knowledge, human knowledge or something, I wrote this down, and I was like, unless you've died, rotted, and were risen from the grave, you can kiss my ass. It's like, that's how I feel sometimes, because it's like, who am I going to trust? Who am I going to trust? I can't trust any of you except for this guy who has gone there. Like in defeated death.
Yeah. And he didn't come back and go to Quora and answer our questions. And at the same, and at the same time, so then you have all of these other visions and experiences. Let's take the Apostle Paul, when he's writing in the book of 2 Corinthians, he's writing about a man who's been to the third heaven, and most scholars believe he's talking about himself. And almost everyone that comes back from that basically says, I don't know how to talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And it's like, you have other people that claim these supernatural experiences of going to the other side and coming back.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but I think the whole rotting in the tomb for 3 days really struck me too, because it's like, typically your body is already reaching its rigor mortis sort of stages, and it's like, no, he's actually dead. He's not just faking it. He's actually dead. And then to defeat death is to rise from that. Like,
well, and we can't even conceptualize this. So there've been a whole spate of Hollywood attempts to treat resurrection in the last couple of years, usually on TV type series. And I've seen some of them, and they really intrigue me, because what all of these shows show is that there's so many questions around this that we just can't navigate.
Yeah. And I guess, where does that leave us with our questions, though? Is that, that's the hard part, is it's like, I kind of keep on going through this intellectual journey, and I I have my Christian upbringing, which I feel is, gosh, I think I gave my life to the Lord when I was 3, supposedly, and so it's like, how do you do that? I don't know. I guess Jesus said, let the little children come to him.
Not a
But,
lot different than we do at 12 or 20 or 50, probably. So
yeah, probably not. It's funny that you say that. 'Cause it was out of complete and total ignorance, but I don't know. That's a bizarre thing to wrap, because it's like, is this reason, or is this something beyond reason, or is it located in reason? And what varieties of not is there different degrees to knowledge, and and what about the metaphysical makeup of human cognition, and to pretend like we know anything about that is I mean, I think that we have pretty decent theories, like of what that is, or what what comprises the human mind, and emotions, and uh, intellect, and the will, or the affective portion of our desire. Uh, but man, it's yeah, the whole certainty thing really messes with me, because I don't know if I can have certain faith, because and that's the thing, is it's like, what is that? That sounds like a paradox to me. There is no such thing as
certain
certain faith.
faith is,
Like,
well, that's right. If you take the Hebrew's definition of what faith is. So, and a thing that occurs to me often too is that when we're talking about knowing in these conversations, I think behind it is both the desire and the expectation that when we know something, we will have mastery over it and the ability to colonize it. I think that has come to become our definition of knowledge. And
yeah,
so if I know my dog will be the perfectly trained, obedient service animal that will never break from its programming. And we
yeah,
have that over some of our machines that we construct, sort of, but we lose it because machines decay and they break. And so, and I think all of this is part of this. C.S. Lewis actually gets into it in the 3rd chapter of The Abolition of Man, which is where the title The Abolition of Man comes from. Because the idea is that if I can know enough psychology that, in a sense, I can read through you and take away the mystery of your personhood, then I have knowledge. And when you understand that desire and that vision in that way, you begin to understand its demonic quality. Because what I really want, and this is what Tolkien gets at in The Lord of the Rings, what I really want is to subjugate you, all your glory, all your power, and your future. And the amazing thing about the Christian God is that this is what he does not do to us, that his will as expressed in creation is actually freedom. Freedom sufficient that we can do the horrendous things we've done to this world that we've done. Freedom sufficient to the idea that, and this is where I'm not a universalist, freedom sufficient to the idea that we can finally say to God, my will be done, and God says, okay. That's, that's why I think we can't know, and we shouldn't know
yeah,
in that way. Now, that's one idea of knowing. Another idea of knowing, which I think is the idea that we were made to know, which is, in a sense, what we might say, we are made to know his glory. Because that's not a controlling, and so again, all the way back to Genesis 2, the man and the woman are gardeners. Well, what are gardeners? On one hand, they don't have the genetic imprint of the plant, so they can, but yet they are sub-creators. They are partners with nature to make nature more glorious than it begins with. And so now we, together with nature, we produce glory to the likes that it delights us and it delights God. And when I see that, I say, okay, this is what we're made for. This is what we're born to. This is the knowledge we should seek, and not the other knowledge, which is the, in a sense, the knowledge that Satan wishes to displace God and to appropriate nature in such a way as we destroy it.
But as soon as you call that a certain name, like reason, or, and I'm not saying that that's what you're trying to say, or scientific knowledge as opposed to poetic knowledge or something, making like a distinction like that, I think it's hard, because then you have like the entire pre-modern understanding of epistemological understanding to kind of cornering the modern epistemological understanding. And it's like, because for 2,000 years or more, like people operated with an understanding of themselves that was much more than we even give ourselves to operate with now. So it's like, but and that's provided so many positives, yet it's also potentially, like, I don't know,
killing the planet.
Are we killing our own destruction, by I don't know, industry and some of these things where you can even see it at an ecological level. If you think that climate change is real. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm saying right now.
Well, not even climate change, but how many other ways, I grew up in Peterson, New Jersey, and, the industry in Peterson fouled the Passaic River to such a degree that, no sane person would eat a fish out of the Passaic River. I mean, no, do not do that. Well, what have we done?
Yeah.
And so this to me is helpful in terms of, and Tolkien gets at this with the kind of magic that the elves had versus the kind of magic that Sauron practiced. And, and you see that spectrum with Gandalf and then Saruman and then Sauron. What is the elven magic, in a sense, brought the glory out of that which was implicit in nature, whereas the other was, it's the difference between elves and orcs.
Yeah. Wow. I've never thought about that reading The Lord of the Rings, but I like it a lot. And I think that there's something there for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of really, the Lord of the Rings is and I don't get that, I get that stuff. I mean, Tim Keller talks about Lord of the Rings often. There's a lot of good Lord of the Rings research out there.
Yeah, I know. And same with any of these stories dealing with these archetypes potentially. And some of this stuff it's not like they're clean cut, like obvious things that we can then turn around and talk about with a group of friends in a circle on the back porch, at least not with, I have a lot of friends that are very bright people, but I don't have a lot of conversations like this, so it's hard to generate this sort of content for myself outside of what I'm experiencing on YouTube, or and it's, I wish that wish that wasn't the case, but also at the same time, I feel like that's a little bit condescending. So,
well, this I think has been the gift of Jordan Peterson, ironically, because when I'm a pastor of a small, struggling, dying church, and to get a group of men together, to get anybody outside the church together, well, that just didn't happen. And suddenly I do a Jordan Peterson meetup, and I have, 12 people show up out of the blue, and we talk about things like this. And we have a Jordan Peterson meetup, but Jordan Peterson, we just use him to start the conversation and find each other. And then we go off and we talk about, we have the kinds of conversation that you and I are having now. And it's like, well, Jordan Peterson, what did he do that started this? I don't know, but I'm glad he did it. And it's really cool that it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I agree. And I think it's good timing. That's for sure. But who am I to even say that? It's God's timing, I guess.
Well, that's right. And what other word can we use for this? No other word is big enough. So that's true. I mean, and but silly little YouTube channel too. I mean, who was I talking to? I was talking to my mother today, and so I post these, and of course my mother takes a look, and she's like, "Where do you watch this?" She watches some of these things. No sane person watches everything I put out. It's way too much. But my mother watches, and she'll pick and choose a conversation and she'll be like, "Well, how do you meet these people? How?" And I say, "Well, they find me." And she's like,
Yeah.
What the heck is going on? I don't know, but hey, ride this wave, baby, and cool, and just be grateful.
Okay. Difficulty averted. Yeah. My cousin was calling me.
What's that?
My cousin was calling me.
Oh. Do you have any meetups in Grand Rapids, Jordan Peterson meetups?
You'd think there would be, and maybe I'm just completely unaware of them because I haven't gone online and say or typed in meetup or tried to look on Facebook, but I probably should.
Well, it's so funny to me because Calvin College is in Grand Rapids. Maybe I'm just a weird duck because I look at this and think, people in my tradition should be all over this stuff. And it's like, you're the first dude I talked to from Grand Rapids that I don't know, and you're from Cornerstone. What's with that, Calvin College? Come on. Where's my
Oh man, I talked with my philosophy professor, and hey wife. Anyway, she's too shy to come in the camera.
That's okay.
I was talking to my philosophy department head, and I was like, so have kids been bringing up? I went and bought a pig from him because he raises pigs or whatever. So I bought a pig from him. Yeah, dude, he's a Wendell Berry scholar. You know who Wendell Berry is?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so he's written some, I don't know, wrote a book on Wendell Berry or something. I don't know. So, but he is, runs a CSA farm and all that. I go to pick up a pig from him, and I'm like, are kids coming into your classes and talk about this Jordan Peterson stuff? And he was like, yeah, we just watched a clip in class about something and talking about the nature of hierarchies and stuff. And I was like, but I remember taking a class from you, postmodern theory or whatever. And we learned that all hierarchies are innately violent, and it's he was like, yeah, I don't know what to think. He didn't really have much. And then,
shut up and give me the money for the pig.
Yeah, get out of here quick. No, he's the best guy I know, but he's he was like, I just don't know about his postmodernism. I think he's a little bit screwed up on postmodernism, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. Cause it's like, I took postmodernism, and what you did in that class is you took everything I believed in, threw it up on the wall, and was like, okay, you can only pick one, and it's like, I'm not really, but it's that class. It was hard to get through. Uh, and reading some of the postmodern notable theorists or whatever, it's not when Jordan Peterson critiques postmodernism, I feel like a lot of what he says is valid, but I feel like it's not he's not diving into it to the extent that like maybe he could, or I'd like to hear him do, because it's like I'm like, okay, I'm following you, I'm tracking, but go further. But it's like I can't make demands like that. So yeah.
But it's true, and I think I had actually, I owe Quentin Schultz a conversation if he wants to, but Quentin Schultz is a communications prophet, Calvin, and he made a few little YouTubes about communication style of Jordan Peterson and Donald Trump and such. But and I know some people in the Calvin community are talking about him, because I have my spies, and they tell me people are talking, but it's like, come on, people. All you need is a Gmail account. Say something. You got a webcam on that MacBook Air of yours.
Yeah.
Contribute to the conversation. And
and there's so many bright students in this area that I've gone on to have either graduated and gone on to do incredible things, or even you graduated from Calvin, and here you are like doing these videos, and it's like, it's just, and I'm not trying to inflate your ego, but these have been so helpful for so many people. And like, I just wish that, because there's almost like this weird thing where I feel like, yeah, the untouchable, like, don't, there's, everybody shrugs when you bring up Jordan Peterson sometimes, or at least a lot of my really bright friends who I'm almost embarrassed to talk about my fascination with it, because it's for some reason I'm worried that they're gonna think all the same reasons that Jordan Peterson gets called a conservative or the alt-right or something. You don't want to be affiliated with that sort of thing. And it's like, how does that extend all the way from Jordan Peterson down to me, where I'm embarrassed with my friend at Kelvin, or something like that. It's like,
that's exactly
I think
right.
he's gonna shrug me. So
and people, I'm sorry, people are just cowards, and I hear this. So Peter Boghossian and James, I forget his last name. They were on Joe Rogan, and so they're, for years I've been saying this progressive liberationism. This is a religion. It's infecting the church, and I think it's actually a Christian heresy. But it's just it's helpful to identify it and recognize it, and recognize some of the validity of what they have to say, so on and so forth. But then you have people that are like, well, I would say something, and it's like, okay, I understand, but at some point you got to just stop and say, you know what, this is what I think. And Peterson on this is dead on right when he talks about Solzhenitsyn, and the whole society trundles along down the slope because people don't stop and say, hey, this is what I think. And you know what? Okay, hate me for it. And just go ahead.
Man.
I don't care. You can feel what you want to about me, but it's the way it is. And I don't know.
That boldness, I feel like that's I didn't even know if I really wanted to join in on this conversation and even have a talk with you, because I feared. I think I'm filled with fears, as we all are.
Yeah.
But it's like fearing to even take that first step into having a conversation, like beginning that dialogue with people. And it's like, man, I'm glad some people took the steps, because they've kind of paved the road already. And it's like, I can kind of walk down that a little bit and, get my toes wet, and then maybe my ankles. So,
Well, that's what leadership is.
yeah.
That's what leaders do. Leaders stick their neck out and they don't get everything right. And Jordan Peterson doesn't get everything right. He's a human being. None of us do. But at some point you stand up and you say, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to put it out there. And, you don't like it. You don't like it. I can live with that. But that's what you have to do. And I think, part of the thing that's, so yeah, I'm the pastor of the intellectual dark web. Well, there we go. I'll just hang that on my wall.
You are.
But, it's also the truth that, okay, I'm in my 50s, so I'm not going to be running for any denominational muckety muck position. And so I pastor an insignificant church in a backwater place in the Christian Reformed Church. I'm not a pastor in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is, of course, the holy city for the Christian Reformed Church. But why live if you're not going to engage and do it? And get some stuff wrong, but just don't sit there like an idiot with your mouth shut and let the world go by.
Yeah. I wonder if that has any relation to like a pandemic of, psychological issues and, like mental illness sort of running rampant. And I mean, it's affected me and the majority of people I know now. So it's like, you're either on an antidepressant or you're smoking marijuana or you're doing something of that effect. And it's like, there's major self-esteem issues.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what's so interesting about like what Jordan Peterson is doing too, because it's like, it's giving these people the strength in their legs to get up. It's like you're stuck in bed for days on end, and it's like, okay, maybe I can't even clean my room, but at least I can like go downstairs and microwave this macaroni.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's like,
I think part of the thing with Peterson is that he's actually weak in some of the right ways too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's a fragility about him that you can tell. It's, and that comes out with his diet, with his moodiness.
Even his thought, even upon self-recollection. I mean, I think it's hard to have a conversation with people about like, okay, well, you could have done what Hitler did. Like, how do you see yourself as rising above in that situation? Or are you the person standing before Jesus nailed to the cross and being like, are you going along with it? Or are you, and it's like, to begin seeing yourself as the person who is as depraved to the extent that you're capable of pretty much any atrocity that man has ever known. It's like, then you understand, and you get to that point where you realize what Solzhenitsyn said about the line of good and evil dividing the human heart, and understanding. I feel like that's missing and for a lot of people. But how is that empowering to understand how depraved you are? I don't, and I'm trying to. I know Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, because there's so many people that view that as being something that you should never probably entertain the idea of you being depraved to that extent.
Yeah. And so in, obviously my tradition in the Christian Reformed Church and Calvinism, I mean, total depravity was this is something that we were all nursed in, but I've seen it go both ways. And Tim Keller has a phrase where he says, you have to be sad in just the right way to be happy enough. You have to be happy in just the right way to be sad enough. And I see the doctrine of total depravity as enormous liberation,
Yeah.
because I know I won't get it right. So that should tell the perfectionist side of me, you go sit over there. You go sit over there and fuss with the fringes on the carpet and wash your hands 50 times. You go sit over there. When I went to the Dominican Republic, we had a little language school thing that we did before then. It was supposed to help us learn languages. And the guy in the thing said to me, he said, to learn a new language, you have to make a million mistakes. You might as well get started. So that's how I felt about my videos. I'm not a perfectionist, and I'm gonna say all kinds of things wrong, but I might as well get started and knocking them down. And I think and again, I think C.S. Lewis nails it in The Abolition of Man, that people, men without chests, their heads look big only because their chests are so small, and people ought to be saying their piece. And the left gets this. I mean, their whole culture of calling out and standing up and speaking out. Hey, good for you. You got an idea, you're going to say it. Now, be ready to listen to the other side too, and we're going to have a conversation. We're not going to hurt each other. We're not going to throw stones. We're going to try and practice civilities. That means we're going to have to kind of keep a handle on our emotional selves, but that's how we sort things out together.
Yeah. Civility dies with the death of dialogue, I think. Yeah. I don't know who said that, but that's scary when you realize that so many people are holding their breath. And yeah. Hey, I got a question for you though.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the whole did you ever read the Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning? Are you familiar with any of that?
Yeah. A number of years ago.
That I think that book sort of saved my life at a particular time, and I needed that message. But then I there was a lot of critique that came around after that, sort of saying it was too oriented on grace and love and God's unconditional, relentless tenderness, but it's like that was, I think at that point I was so broken, and I mean, I needed to hear that message, because gosh, I've been on and off antidepressants for 7 years now, and so it's like, I need it. And I don't know why I was as broken as I was, but it was like understanding that God loves you just as you are, not as you should be, was the thing that, like, when I read that line for the first time, I think it rocked me. And it's like, maybe people in my past when I was young sort of spoke that message, but it didn't hit my ears until I read it in that book.
Yeah.
But
that book did that for a lot of people. That was a really important book for a lot of people. See, here's the thing about language, and we started talking about language.
Yeah.
This truth that God is way more good and loving than you can possibly believe is true. And it's likely true that we cannot language or represent it, because that's what we're doing with language. We're representing it. We cannot represent it strong enough to actually express how deep that truth is. It's also true that God is more demanding and demands more from us than we can possibly achieve. So the bar is both, the grace is both so powerful and the demand so powerful that, when you listen to Jordan Peterson talk about the demands of the, sort yourself out. Don't give yourself an excuse. You can't hit that hard enough to fully represent that aspect of God. But the other is true too. And the thing is, it's very difficult for us to integrate that. Yeah. And so a lot of what we try to do and it's kind of like the circling the drain thing. So, now I'm out of balance on the one. Now I'm out of balance on the other. And and so we circle the drain. And that's part of the reason that, so I often work with the structure of the Heidelberg Catechism, which is misery, deliverance, gratitude, because when I put God's demand, when I get, it's not even balance really, but when I screw it up and God's demand crushes me. You read the Sermon on the Mount and it's like, I can't meet that bar. And then you see grace. And in the light of the other, so now I see grace. And then you want to slip to, no, but then there's the other. And saints live that out in amazing ways, but we struggle to represent it in language, and we struggle to represent it in our lives.
Is the desire to want to integrate that well, or as well as you possibly can, wrong? Like, I don't know, that maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but it's like, it's almost striving for perfection again at that point, if you want to integrate it so perfectly, where it's like, well, you can't.
Yeah. I'm not worried about getting it perfectly. I will, baby, that boat has sailed. I have messed up in so many ways. Perfection is not on the table. So, but I do, and that's, I think, where Peterson gets at, where part of, what he's really brought to the table is this idea of meaning and how that integrates it, because it's and I love how C.S. Lewis articulates this in The Last Battle. It's further up and further in. And this is where God's infinite nature is so breathtaking, because we can go further up and further into him and never exhaust him. The words of the great hymn Amazing Grace gets at this. When we've been there 10,000 years bright, shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. And what we should know about what praise is that it is gardening in Eden is praise. Painting a room is praise. Making a video is praise, because it praises singing and praises liturgy and praises, but all that we're doing here is praise, and there's no exhausting God's goodness.
Yeah. Oh man. And some of these things are so grounding too, like some of these practices, even going back to just the practical things that we do, it's like having not only the habits, but I don't know. For me, it was oddly enough when I was going through depression, and I went through some cognitive behavioral therapy, and then I also I found gardening, and which was oddly synchronized with meeting my philosophy professor, who was a Wendell Berry fanatic, and then it was like I was gardening and like smoking fish that I was catching in the rivers and doing all, like, just getting my hands dirty in some of these, like I don't know, what's getting my hands into some soil, like what is that? Like it's very like, how did that heal me? It was healing to do some of those things.
Yes. Well, you're made to do those things. You are. And this part of the reason we're, there's so much anxiety and so much depression is that we're not made to sit in these little cubicles and look at these screens.
Yeah.
That's crazy making. And so, no, that makes complete sense to me, that get out and do something with your hands, paint a room, work a garden, learn how to dance, with plants, my blog, my little description on my blog is gospel word gardening in the age of decay, because that's what we're doing. That's what I do as a pastor, because I work with words. But you get your hands in the soil and this crop didn't turn out. So next year this is what we're made for. And again, in my view of the resurrection, we're never going to stop. It's just going to get better. And that's a tremendously joyful thought.
Yeah. Man, I love that. When you say that though, do you mean, yeah, man, maybe this is too complicated of a question to ask, but when you say that, do you mean that we're bringing the kingdom in a way?
We bear witness. God always brings it. We're always sub-creators. We bear witness. And all the witness that we bear in the age of decay, Paul says we labor not in vain, which means that in some way, in not only the resurrection of our bodies, but the renewal of all creation, that which we have borne witness to is fulfilled. Now, C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce, I put this in a video, I think it was C.S. Lewis on the resurrection, I put it in that video. In The Great Divorce is this amazing passage where, in a sense, the resurrection starts moving time backwards. And I don't know how this works. We can't even describe what happens, Paul can't describe the vision that he saw. Okay, so we're not going to represent it well. But we have reason to believe, because of the resurrected body of Jesus, that your capacity to imagine joy cannot come close to what God has planned for you.
Yeah.
Now even just think about that promise. And someone will say, you're not justified in thinking that. Take your justification. I'll tell you where to stuff it. Yeah. I believe it. And I believe God is that good. And I believe his plan for the redemption of this world is that joyful and that beautiful. And and when in those moments that God gives me the grace to see it and to feel it, I can suffer that which I need to bear.
Yeah. I can attest to that.
And it's ironically so often in the low, dark moments that it's sometimes in the darkest moments of my life that God has shown me that I've been able to experience that beauty. And I don't know why that is either. Because you would think it's grace. It's grace. We're not in control of this.
Yeah.
And it's when go ahead.
No. I liked what you're saying. I had a thought in regards to deliberately entering into suffering. Because you almost have that resolve when you taste, or you don't necessarily say bring it on, but you kind of do in a weird way where it's bring it on. I will go through the void if I need to, or what have you, because it's the blessings that await on the other side. And so the light at the end of the tunnel is, it's your whole focus. And it's weird because I heard somebody talking about psychedelics, and it might have been in Rebel Wisdom's stuff, but they were talking about how psychedelics are a way to sort of go through an ego death.
Right.
And I was fascinated by ego death for a long time, and we don't have to go down the whole psychedelics road, but I my whole view kind of has shifted from kind of being very intrigued by that stuff, and I mean, I probably will forever be intrigued by it because it's fascinating. But
Yeah.
it's at the same time, it's like I think I have so much fear that of that sort of realm, and the whole quote from Carl Jung, be beware of unearned
Unearned
wisdom.
wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, that is profound, and
Yeah.
and it's like, well, I feel like going through suffering and reaching the other side to whatever, maybe enlightenment, if you want to use that word, but that's not one I'd prefer to use. I don't know which one I'd prefer to use, but you get to the other side, and that suffering was validated or somehow necessary, and you see it from the other vantage point, and it's like there's like a shortcut, and then there's like the not shortcut. It's like, and I almost view psychedelics, and I might get shade for this, but I almost see psychedelics as a shortcut.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to speak negatively about it because I know people could potentially be relieved from a lot of pain and suffering if psychedelics could be used and supervised and taken with the magnitude of what these plants actually embody. But I think there's a road to enlightenment that's through suffering, and there's a road to enlightenment that's sort of, I don't know, you just pop a couple mushrooms, or you take a I don't know, man. It's like, it's weird to me that's a route that people take to and somehow they see that as being more profound than anything they can experience through deliberately pursuing difficulty, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that we have to deliberately pursue difficulties. Often what we have to do is pursue meaning instead of expedience. I mean, expedience is that's the cop out. And and it comes down to being faithful in a relationship. It comes down to it comes down to the kinds of common sacrifice that men and women have been making throughout the centuries in faithfulness to each other and to their community. And I don't know what to think about psychedelics. God made the plants too, and what God does with them, I'm personally not going to. I have no plans of taking any psychedelics. I have ways from 50 years of being a Christian of experiencing God's joy. Yeah. And so often those ways are, those paths are, they're two tracks with suffering, just as you said. The joy and the suffering come together.
Yeah.
And I can't explain that, but it's the suffering, and that's why suffering is not escapism or distraction. It's the partner. It's joy becomes its partner, and joy redeems it. And we know that because every single good movie, every single good story is about triumph over suffering, calamity, catastrophe. And that's why we can imagine, that's why we can believe that having gone through the miseries of this world, God will use those sufferings to make even more joy than we could have had without. And I can never, and I don't try to do that math with individuals because I can't do that math, but I believe God can. And so I leave it with him.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, we've done an hour and a half of this, Luke. You thought we weren't going to be able to talk very long.
Yeah, I thought I didn't know if I could even articulate myself well enough to get this far. But thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been great fun. I recorded it, so I'll send you the recording, and you can decide if you can rewatch it with your wife and decide if this is something that you'd like to share with the world.
Pop a bag of popcorn.
That's right. Here we go. I'm gonna watch myself. I never watch myself. That's too painful.
Yeah, I know. That's the bad part. That's why actors don't watch their movies.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah. Well, it's great to meet you, Luke.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
And God bless you.
Yeah, you as well.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.